Oh man, the book The Hate You Give. In the
Okay.
book, they describe the girl as a dark-skinned woman. But in the movie, they went with, and she's a great actress, but they went with a light-skinned
Yeah.
woman. And we're now moving from the topic of racism into colorism, where favoritism is shown to lighter-skinned women
Yeah.
than darker-skinned women.
Yeah.
So in commercials, they want to have, a woman, a black woman in there. They'll have one token black woman,
Yep.
and she's a lighter shade. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But if you're going to show and represent black women, you should have all shades.
Yeah.
Because we come in different shades, different sizes, different colors, right?
I like the comment you made earlier. We immediately judge by what we see. We look at the cover of the book,
Yeah.
and in many cases, these are real books here. Gee, they're not even props. In many cases, that's all we ever do. We never open the book.
It's true. It's a
don't-
shame, too, because
Yeah.
some books come with really interesting things in it, and
Yeah.
and it's been just dismissed so quickly.
Yep.
I want to know, based on like the conversation that we're having right now, we touched on colorism. Now that like we've spoken about, and you brought it up, but I'm curious to know, have you seen examples of colorism like lately from your perspective, if you think about it?
Not specifically. I think to some degree I'm a little insulated here at the journey. I know that there is challenges within the community.
Yeah.
That especially we have significant Caribbean and South Asian populations, and they don't necessarily mix. And I don't know whether it's necessarily all about race. I think part of it is about culture and language.
Yes, that's
You know,
another thing.
Yeah. if your first language is Urdu or something like that, you're going to tend to flock together with people who have the same first language, because then you can communicate
Of course.
clearly.
Yeah.
Also, food choices and things like that. So there's a lot of cultural influence as well. Not that there isn't, and I think there's a tendency to say that racism's all about white and black or white and whatever, but there's also racism between all the
Culturally.
races. We're pretty good, and there's racism within races. If you go to Europe, we would tend to classify all of Europe as white, but there's different shades of white. So if you're Roma, okay, the Roma people are a little bit darker. Well, they're totally prejudiced against. Also, tends to be a prejudice between the northern Germanic people and the southern people of more Latin or Italian, Spanish, and that. So even within a race, there's. I'll never forget. I was in Kenya and I was talking to a leader in the church, and he was. I was sitting in this meeting, and the head of this church was there, and at one point he says, "Oh, that black man," and I'm like, "Okay,
It's your cue to
don't."
go.
Yeah, and I mean, I was in a position where I wasn't going to ask him what he meant by that,
Oh, my
but I think it was an insult.
Oh, definitely.
And I'm thinking, okay, how does one black man insult another black man by calling him black? I just,
Yeah.
it went right. I never did find out, but I thought
Yeah.
he wasn't happy about that man, and somehow or another that was an insult. And I thought, that's interesting.
Yeah,
You know?
you know what's interesting about that? It's the root of where it started. It's when we were slaves, there were field slaves and house slaves.
Yes.
So the field slaves tend to be darker because they're in the sun all day, and then the house slaves tend to be lighter because they're in the house.
Yep.
And so there is a hierarchy that's built from that.
Okay.
So the light skins are considered more superior because of their position
Yeah.
within the slave hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so that grew from there. And then from there, it went into, in our time, in media, in movies, in society. So just, it's interesting to know where that's rooted from. And it's really sad, actually, in the Black community, how divisive it is, how we are putting down our own people.
Yeah.
So it's like racism is here, and in racism there's colorism.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's really sad to see how not only is the generic white man putting down Black people, but now Black people are putting each other down instead of coming together. So that's sad.
We've talked about all the issues.
Yes.
Do either of us have any solutions?
I always say, for me, the solution is open the conversation, be transparent, and don't be afraid to ask questions, but in the right way and the right time.
Well, and that becomes, this goes back to your comment about reading the room.
Reading the room,
individual.
read the energy.
Yeah. Because I generally, I mean, because I'm the manager, I'm going to initiate stuff anyways, whatever it is about here. But by initiating the conversations on race, I know that probably there are times when I wonder whether people would really rather not talk about it, but I'm the manager and I'm the white guy, so maybe I just will endure this and hope he shuts up soon and talks about it.
Yeah, and to that point, I think another thing that's important is relationship.
Yeah.
You know, making relationships than your normal circle of the environment that you're in sometimes. Could be just white people or just Black people, but going outside of that and making relationships with people that don't look like you or that don't have the same culture. Because then when you have relationships, you can ask questions without feeling like, oh, am I allowed? Can I? And I think once we break those barriers of feeling like we can't have that conversation or feeling like it's taboo, the problem is never going to change. We're always going to move the same until we have conversations like this or an open dialogue.
If we set aside skin color for a moment, most of what we are is our culture, you know, and our language. You speak, what, 3 or something like that?
3,
Yeah, you know. I'm monolingual. Even my grasp of English some days is a little light. And our culture both enriches us and inhibits us. So when I talk to somebody who has grown up with a culture that's different than mine, I learn about the things that make them everything they are. And I can see, wow, that is something that I think I didn't grow up with, but I think is cool and would be good to be a part of my culture. Okay. I also see things where I go, oh my God, that's, you know, that is such an inhibiting thing in that person's culture. It's a shame. So for example, the treatment of women universally is, you know, let's face it, if being Black is a problem, being Black and a woman becomes, whoa, hammered, double whammy, right? Okay. But then being white male is a problem because I don't necessarily understand what's going on, because I could just go my own merry way and do my own merry thing, right? And if I only do that, if I only look through this lens that I've grown up with, the culture that I've grown up with, the people that I've hung up with, and I don't open up my eyes, I'll just be a narrow person who lives a very kind of impoverished life. Where if I have conversations with people from a different culture, different race, different language, you know, first language, then I can learn from them and grow and be so much more than if I just stay in my little slot, my little ghetto.
Yeah. Why do you think some white men and white people in general are comfortable staying in that little role?
I think there's multitude of reasons. One, a lot of people, humans do tend to flock together.
Right.
Okay. or to use the term, we tend to be little ghettos. Okay, so for many people, there really aren't the opportunities. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where Howie Hayes was the black guy.
Oh boy.
Okay, he was a few years older than me. He was a star on our football team at Alderwood Collegiate. Okay, and he was really popular. Everybody loved Howie. I mean, and he was a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I never really got to know him, but I saw him. He was obvious. He stood out. He was the one black dude in the whole school.
Right.
And he was an all-star, and football was important at Alderwood. So I had no opportunities because he was older than me. I never got to see, even hi to him or meet him in any way. So that becomes one of the problems when you just don't have the opportunity to meet and know people from a different cultural or racial background. So that becomes part of it. We flock together because we're comfortable with, they call it homogeneous unit principle. We hang around with like, and we're uncomfortable with the other because we don't understand the other,
Yes.
because we don't spend any time with the other and get to discover that the other actually isn't really all that much different.
Yes, yeah. I think we mentioned this in another podcast. People are uncomfortable with what they know. They don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
People fear what they don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, you asked me in the other podcast about what I learned. Well, one of the things I learned is that basically we're all alike. When you think about it, when you take it down to the individual, we all want food, we all want shelter, we all want security, we all love our children. We want our children to grow up in better circumstances than we did. We all hate injustice or being taken care of or taken advantage of. So when it comes down to it, human beings basically have all the same. You can look at Maslow's scale hierarchy of needs, and we all fit in there.
Yeah.
A lot of the division comes more for political decisions or power decisions or whatever. People who want to, look back at slavery. I mean, not that it isn't happening in great amounts today, but it was all about power and money. Here we can grab these people and use them as labor, cheap labor. I mean, we did have to feed a little bit, so it cost a little bit of money to have a slave, but the payback was bigger, right? So it was all about power and abuse of another human being and about economics. Nothing to do with love, security, your children doing better at all. Weren't recognizing that. I mean, I joked with you the other day about the mark of Cain, because there were many in the Bible Belt who tried to justify slavery through the Bible because...
That's another topic.
Oh yeah, it is another topic.
Very passionate about.
Yeah. So the mark of Cain was blackness, you see, and therefore you're subhuman. Right? So it doesn't matter how we treat you because you're not the same as us, you're not equal.
Right.
Obviously you can't be equal.
Right.
Well, that's just like...
It's beyond me, really. It's ridiculous. It reminds me of what's happening in this day and age where black women aren't taken seriously in hospitals. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's actually statistics that prove it. I don't have it right now, but look it up.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of black women actually die in hospital beds than white women because when a black woman is saying, "Doctor, I'm not feeling good, this is painful," they're like, "Oh, it's fine, you're okay." But it's actually interesting that it links back to, the Jim Crow days, I believe, where they thought that black women could take on more pain.
Tougher.
So, yeah.
Go in the field, drop your baby, and then keep plowing. Yeah.
They actually had these events where they would, make black people feel pain, black women feel pain, and just keep going. It's really interesting. So I encourage
Wow,
everyone
I
to read up on
not.
that.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an
Okay.
actual thing, facts and statistics and everything, where now black women in this day and age aren't taken seriously in
Yeah.
hospitals, so it equates to more black deaths, black
Yeah.
women dying more than white women because they're not taken
Yeah.
seriously. So it's just really interesting how the resonance of slavery
Yeah.
is still going on now,
Yeah.
but in a different form.
You know, those who enslave people, part of their rationale to justify it was to basically view the people they're enslaving as inhuman. But when you think about it, where really is the inhumanity lying?
There you go. There you go.
You know, it's inhuman. Well, and then actually you have to look at the phrase and say inhuman. Well, maybe it's very human to do this to each other. And maybe the problem is that we haven't risen above our baser nature.
We are flawed.
Oh,
Broken.
we are a fallen people.
Yeah.
Right? And how we treat each other is horrendous. And maybe we need to remove the word inhuman from the lexicon, because being human is rather a sad state of affairs.
There you go. That's so true.
Yeah. You know, to be able to try to justify that cruelty to yourself makes you incredibly cruel.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to try and rationalize that is worse than, in some ways, than what you're doing, because you're totally deceiving yourself.
Yeah.
And you're missing out on the benefits of getting to know a person
Yeah.
who maybe visually looks different than you, or linguistically is different, or culturally, but has all the basic same needs and wants and desires and hopes and dreams that everybody else has. And if you can meet at that basic level, you know, you can discover some amazing things. As I said earlier, you can discover things about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Kevin, as we're kind of concluding things.
Yeah.
How has your learning journey been? Because everyone has to start from somewhere. And a lot of my white friends have started doing the work, have started acknowledging their privilege, acknowledging where they're at. When did that began for you? Or what made it kind of, what set the domino to your growth?
It's interesting. I mean, I grew up in a basically white neighborhood. You know, I mean, it was mainly Italian and Portuguese. My parents never, ever, there was nothing racist about them at all. Okay, so I kind of grew up with parents who kind of viewed integrity and honesty and being good to one another, and having friends who were, you know, different in whatever mild or extreme way that was. So it never occurred to me. We lived for a very short time in Toledo, Ohio. Now, I was young, you know, I was like 4 or whatever, and it was a mixed race neighborhood. And so I just, I don't remember a start for the journey, because I think I've always been on it. However, I think one of the really powerful moments for me was when I moved from Mississauga to Windsor. And my daughters came home from high school and said, "Dad, this place is really racist." Okay?
High school will do that.
Because I grew up in Toronto, you know, I mean, what, 250 languages or something in the city? My daughters were growing up in Mississauga, which was, you know, a rainbow of people. And then we moved to very white West End of Windsor, and my daughters were just in shock at the language and the attitude of their fellow students, because they were growing up in a very homogenous group across from Detroit, which I think set a attitude for them, because they, because Detroit is a predominantly black city, right? And I think they just kind of watched Detroit and felt white and superior.
Right. Yeah, they felt better then.
Yeah, and I think for me that really was like, whoa, because I don't even think I was thinking that much about race. And then my daughters come home and they're shell-shocked. And it's like, whoa, okay, what has moving to Windsor done to my daughters? Because I don't want them to grow up with the attitudes that their fellow students have.
Yeah.
Now they were old enough and I think, exposed long enough to a multicultural, multiracial society that they were more repelled by what they were seeing than anything else.
Yeah.
And then I think the next moments were the summer of Fergus for me. I remember we talked about making assumptions. So during that summer, one of our volunteers, Shaq, came to talk to me, and very specifically, he wanted to know what I thought.
Right.
And Shaq, I have to look up to him. He is a big black man, okay? I had made an assumption that was totally wrong. I had assumed that Shaq had probably been hassled by the police being big and black. And so I asked him about it. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? I've never encountered that. And I'm like, wow, I just pigeonholed my friend.
Right.
Yeah. Based on his race.
Yeah, like we said, different experience, right?
The
black experience is
it had
so
not
vast.
been his experience.
Right.
And I also felt like I was kind of flattered that he wanted my opinion, but I really wasn't sure that my opinion really mattered. I'm not putting myself down or anything, or don't think highly of myself and my opinions. It's just, I really felt that his opinion mattered more.
Yeah.
Because he had to live with it. I could walk away from it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that is such a big thing. You touched on something, and I know we're trying to conclude this, but
yeah, hey, you can edit the 16 hours down to the 5 minutes or whatever.
I'll leave this in.
Okay.
But you touched on something that's so important, and I think some people don't understand that, when the topic of conversation comes around race or around something that's happened, white people can walk away from that conversation completely hands-free.
Yep.
Whereas black people, we have to carry that throughout the whole day. I remember when the George Floyd thing happened and, all my white friends were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is going on. And I'm like, yeah, it's been happening. And we were just talking about it. And finally the conversations ended. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go get my nails done, or they're like, oh, we're going to go to the mall, maybe go watch a movie. And I was left there with the burden and the hurt and the pain, the anger, the frustration. That week it felt like a month to me. And to be able to see other people just kind of continue on with their lives, and you're there feeling like, okay, why can't I move forward with my life right now? Why can't I feel better? And so it's that in itself is the privilege. You get to walk away not feeling the burden of it as much, not feeling the burden of it at all in those specific moments.
Yeah.
Whereas black people are left with that.
Yeah. There's this saying that I think really doesn't do any justice at all. And it's something along the lines of, you don't really know a person until you walk a mile in their shoes. The problem is what happens after that mile.
Ooh, wait. You touched on something right there.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I could walk a mile in somebody's shoes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I get a little tiny perspective, but then I put my shoes back on.
Right.
And I walk away. And
Right.
All I'm left with is an impression or a feeling, but does that really change anything? You know, yeah, maybe it changes something about my perspective, but I'll never carry the burden. I'll
Right.
never be a black man.
Right.
You know, I've said sometimes in the conversations I've had, you know, here at the Journey, because my staff are all young black women. You know, I've looked, you know, and I said, you need to understand something. I'm not black and I'm not a woman, and I'll never understand what it means. Never. And it doesn't matter how many conversations I have with you. It doesn't matter what I experience. I'll never know what it's to be a young black woman. I barely remember what it is to be a white man. You know, that was so long ago. You know, it's a distant memory. The danger is to make that a barrier.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because I'll never understand it.
Yeah.
I'll never know the feelings.
Yeah.
I'll never realize it. It can be a wall between me and the people. Well, let's make this really personal. I have 3 young black women on staff. Okay, and that because I'll never understand your experiences. And what I find interesting is I've got a Congolese, a Malayan, and a Queens, New Yorker. Okay,
Yeah.
so 3 women from 3 very different backgrounds as well.
Yeah.
I'll never understand. So how do I keep that from being a barrier? Okay, because I have several kinds of different types of relationships with you guys. I'm your boss. You know, I manage the Journey. We're co-team members, though. Let's face it, I'm not much of a boss. I really view us as co-workers and teammates, right?
Yes.
But we're all going to go to our own homes.
Yeah.
We're all going to have the experiences that we have just as human beings. But you guys are also going to take your femaleness and blackness
Yeah.
out of the building with you. I'm going to take my maleness and whiteness and old age out of this building with me. How do I keep, and I have to think of it 2 ways. My responsibilities as being manager of the Journey. How do I keep my team functioning at its best when we have this diversity of experience? How do I not let that be a barrier to our work? But also, I consider myself friends with my team. How do my lack of understanding not become a barrier to my relationship? You know, you will bring your day's experiences to the job as I bring my day's experiences to the job. And let's face it, there are some days we arrive at, and, we individually have to say, okay, how do I overcome what just happened to me so that I can perform my best? But also, how can I be a human being at work at the same time? Because I don't want robots.
Yeah.
I've had people who come here and put on a smiley face, and I know that they just had a lot of crap go down.
Yeah.
And while I appreciate the smile and the positive energy, because I want this to be a positive place, are you actually penalizing yourself trying to pretend that things are better than they are?
You got to do that sometimes. Sometimes it's the only option to cope.
You do, though. I had a great boss. First of all, he was a doctor, and it was in psychology.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, he would call me into his office and sit me down, and he would look at me and go, "So what's up, Kevin?"
Oh,
and I knew at that moment I better answer that question, because he wasn't going to let me out until I did answer that question.
I love that.
And there are times I've done that with my team where I get the fine. It's like, oh yeah, and in fact I'll call you out. I call you guys out. That was not a great find. And there have been many occasions over the years where we end up in the office with a box of Kleenex.
Yes. But to answer your question, I think the way that you would, since we're all coming from different experiences,
Yep.
different cultures, coming into one place to serve this community, I think the way that we can ensure that there's still connection is embracing the differences. You know,
Yeah.
I will never be able to understand your experience as a white man.
Yep.
And I have to embrace that. You know,
Yeah.
that's a reality.
Yep.
And being okay with that reality.
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that we
Yeah.
can connect on. You know, we
Yeah.
can connect on faith. We can
Yeah.
connect on food. We
Yes.
can connect. Oh, definitely. Did you guys hear that? Yes, that was an
Food.
intense. Yes.
Food. Every video we do, I think I lean into the camera and I
you
go,
do.
food.
But yeah, we can never relate to each other in experiences on race, but we
Yeah.
can always connect on other things as well.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
acknowledging that and
Yeah.
connecting anyways.
Yeah. Now, we may never be able to wrap up this video
I
until
know.
we deliberately choose to. But,
yeah.
but let me say this, and then I'm going to let you conclude.
Perfect.
Or actually, oh, hold on. That was a power move.
What's up?
Well, I just said, and I'll let you.
Oh yeah.
That was it. And we've talked, I don't think we touched upon this actually very much, in that I'm always aware, being the white guy, that I am often in a position of power. And so if I initiate something, if I just pulled the white card, you know. So actually, you set this up. No, that's the, see, I can't win now. I have trapped.
the room,
I have
Kevin.
trapped
Read the
myself.
room.
There is no way to finish this video because anything I say at this moment is a white power move.
Kevin, I do want to tell you something. I do want to tell you something that I know last year when George Floyd passed away, it was very necessary to elevate Black voices. But now, like, we've elevated those Black voices so that the society can learn about something that they've now just become aware of because of the death of a Black man at the hands of the police. So at that point, it was very important to elevate Black voices, to learn. But now that we have had that opportunity, it's so important for white people to speak up as well. Because unfortunately, some people won't take things seriously unless it comes from a white mouth.
Yeah, crap. You're right.
Yeah,
crap.
yep.
Could I say crap on a podcast?
I think you can.
Okay, I can say crap.
And so I want to tell you that your voice is important right now because there's people that will listen to you and won't listen to me because I don't look like them.
Yeah.
So you actually have power in that you can speak on your experiences. You can open up the conversation in your environments, and that's going to spark up a conversation, and then they're going to have another conversation with someone else. So don't be afraid to open up that conversation. It's needed.
Yeah.
It's so needed.